super excited to invite up my friend Jim Lanzone, the CEO of Yahoo.
All right.
Good to see you.
All right. You didn't say old dog.
Old dog, new tricks. Okay, the title I originally had with this was Old Dog, New Tricks. PR people didn't like that.
Yeah.
But
All right.
it's kind of, right? It kind of fits in the sense that
It does.
Yahoo,
it's kind of the oldest. I mean, it's one of the oldest.
right?
You know.
It's like,
Although remember, the name Yahoo, it's even older. You know, it's Yahoo and AOL were both what were bought by Verizon, put back together, renamed Yahoo in September.
correct.
So it is different that way.
Correct. Well, I'm fascinated by, look, you've been around media for a while, stints at CBS and IAC and Tinder. What was your personal rationale? When you got the phone call, presumably from the folks at Apollo, you said, what? What was your reaction? Why did you take
It was a little different. I mean, I was actually, consulting is probably the wrong word, but in touch with them when they were looking at the deal, helping them think about it. And the thing about Yahoo, and it's with the CBS days, I was there for almost 9 years, the CBS part of that kind of stands out a lot. But CBS Interactive was a conglomerate of 35 brands in 15 verticals. And, that was a portfolio approach that we managed. And it's very similar to Yahoo. We were kind of the bizarro version of Yahoo in those ways. And so we were kind of in our own way I'd say the closest example to what they were looking at buying. And we knew the company. I've competed or partnered with them back to the 90s, to my first Web 1.0 startup, and have known every person who's ever come through there and managed it.
Right.
So I knew the company well enough to give some advice as they were looking at the deal. So if you fast forward a few months, and they hadn't closed yet, but they'd agreed to buy it, and that's when we started talking more seriously. And so very similar to CBS, where they had bought CNET, which had been a public company. They'd bought Sportsline, which had been a public company. They had all these other assets. Streaming wasn't a thing yet. They were streaming the last 5 episodes only for free, and there were still debates about whether to do that. And it reminded me a lot of that, where a lot of these properties just had not been managed properly over the years. And we've all, I think a lot of people in here have felt that about it, from afar. And as a product person, maybe, I felt like it really had been undermanaged, right? Call it mismanaged, but undermanaged over the years. And there was just so much that you could do with that. And so to me, it looked like something I had done before. And that turnaround at CBS was, not super appreciated, because over the years it became about CBS All Access and other things that we were doing. But in those early years, it took a lot of it took 18 to 24 months to get that thing turned around and moving in the right direction, bringing all the right people in, start doing all the right things with the products, which led to, the turnaround of CNET actually paid for CBS All Access.
Right.
Because CBS didn't really want anything to do with it. Right. They were looking one-eyed, sideways at streaming. So we had to fund it ourselves. And so those are all the kinds of things you could see doing once you got a hold of these properties here. So I felt passionate about doing it.
So it was effectively some pattern recognition. You've
absolutely.
seen it before, and I guess IAC is a similar kind of conglomerate of a number of brands.
That's right. That's right. And actually during the IAC years, Ask Jeeves was my first turnaround. And you can't, I think the day I joined there, I think it was 79 cents a share and about to be delisted from the NASDAQ. And we had an amazing run for 4 years when we sold IAC. And then IAC was 60 brands that at the time they went away from this but tried to become an operating company. So I kind of saw the wrong way of running a conglomerate at that time.
The problem, of being a turnaround guy and doing a good job is they keep calling you for more turnaround.
But here's the thing. So if you were to take the name Yahoo off of it, and this is definitely part of Apollo's deal thesis, and just said, look, 900 million users a month, billions of revenue, really good profits, and really hadn't been firing on all cylinders for quite a long time. But if you just looked at those assets with a different name, especially the growth rates, we've had very high double-digit growth rates coming into this year, and if you were to look at that business, I think you would think about it differently.
So, yeah, generically, massive scale, first-party data, growth, profitable.
Yeah.
If you were to describe it generically and ask someone to guess the name,
That's right.
It's possible they
and
wouldn't even come up with Yahoo.
Yeah, and so that's something that I knew that my team and I could do something with and come in. There's great people there too.
Yep.
And so yeah, that was the Apollo deal thesis, and same for me.
So the Apollo deal thesis around better management, some of the parts, because obviously you've done a couple of transactions, sold off Yahoo Japan and your CDN business. What was the, or was it just the existing profitability? Presumably not just the existing profitability, but what was the thesis from a financial standpoint that this could be better managed and was probably undervalued in the marketplace?
Well, yeah, look, I'd say there's two things. One is there were definitely assets. Yahoo Japan's a good example. EdgeCast is, the CDN business is being merged in with Limelight to create a new company called Edgio. And there are actually a few more that you already are pretty close to getting them their cash back.
Right.
And we're 7 months into it.
Amazing.
So I think it's the fastest an Apollo deal has ever returned the cash, especially at that size. And so everything else is upside. And when you look at that, yeah, first of all, I think that the deal was a really good deal. They probably got it for less than they should have in the first place. And then if you just go vertical by vertical, which is how I've always done this, it's not that there's one, there is one brand and one company, but these are individual companies essentially within the company. Yahoo Mail is second to Gmail, has 28% of all email. That competes in its own.
28% of all email.
We saw $500 billion worth of receipts alone in email last year. Wow. Just from the commerce side of what people are using Yahoo Mail for. Sports is number 2 to ESPN for now. It'll be number 1 soon. Yeah. And finance is 100 million users a month, and one of the, it's probably the crown jewel and one of the most important categories. Search is still, third. It's a distant third now. Right. It's probably about where Ask Jeeves was when I got in terms of, but in the best market that you could be in, right? So that revenue is still huge. Yep. And I mean, you talk about a category I think we could do something with. So I look at each one of these things individually, and when you think about, there are companies just in finance that just do one part of what we do, who have been valued at $3, $4, or $5 billion, which is the whole of what all of Yahoo has been valued at. Right. So if you take 20 shots on goal and 5 of these things really hit, which has kind of been my formula in the past, then that's a big outcome. Yeah, and listen, private equity, as we'll learn in the next panel, has had some huge wins in digital media of late. This one, I mean, as you describe the scale of these assets, you got quite a number of shots on goal. Which one of them could return? Well, and the other thing is, it actually is not, as I got in there and saw it really interestingly, there's a lot we can do with the operations of the company to make it better. And really, I'd say the headline for that for me is becoming a product company again, right? Product-focused company again, and seeing everything through that lens. I think it's been a little while, but operationally, it's not a turnaround. It's very profitable. I mean, I have some of my employees in here now who know what bonuses were paid for last year. I mean, the company's has been financially cranking, so it's actually starting from a really good spot. So earlier this morning, we were describing like the ecosystem as sort of trifurcated between sort of walled gardens, where they're strictly O&O, the open web, but now this sort of middle category, we described them as hedge gardens, large O&O businesses with first-party data, but maybe not large enough to these companies are combining them with off-prem or network businesses. You have a massive ad tech business. In fact, you have a 3-part ad tech business. What's involved? Because we all remember about 8 to 12 years ago, the big run of acquisitions that Yahoo and AOL. Half of them worked for those companies. Separately, I think that's probably right. Show of hands. And there was what? There was probably like 20 companies within that, and I'm sure a ton of tech stacks. I think more. Presumably that's all been rationalized at this point. Yeah, I mean, it is now a unified stack across the DSP, SSP, and native. And again, I think about that as a standalone business, and certainly one of the most important reasons people work with us is access to O&O and the 900 million users a month. But You know, the DSP grew 70% last year. I mean, we are winning customers head to head in that marketplace. It's the same thing across all of it.
Once again, if you generically described a DSP, a scaled DSP, growing 70%, I think most people would put in the trade desk as the answer.
Yeah. Yes. And they're doing a great job too.
Yeah.
But yeah, people, and the other thing is it's similar, I think, for the brand overall. Like, people are, you know, they understand the real value of it if you were to take the brand off of it and just say, what is that inventory and what, you know, what is the size of that walled garden and that content? It's incredibly valuable, and it converts. And so, and the team is always lauded for, you know, on the service side, like it's a really well-run operation. So yes, that's another, you know, really important part of the business. But I would say is, I think that if you go, it is all one thing, and the investments that I want to make across each one of these content and product verticals, you know, and getting really healthy in those places for growth and getting over 1 billion users a month.
Right.
That all accrues to the benefit of the future of the ads business.
Do you even think of yourselves as competing with walled gardens, or is that the wrong question?
You know, I'd say it's easy to only look at the truly big trillion-dollar companies and say, you know, those are the only ones at scale. But again, our scale is immense compared to everybody else.
Yep.
You know, and so I think that's what's important, including the fact that we're just getting going on certain things too. So I feel like the future's even brighter. So yeah, I mean, we all, it's co-opetition in a lot of cases, right? And no, I'm never going to suggest that we're head to head with Google and Facebook. Right. And at the same time, you know, we're big enough to throw our weight around too in certain cases. So.
Yep. No, absolutely. This morning we were talking about sort of subcategory areas that we saw as being particularly high growth and opportunistic, given some of the changes taking place in data restrictions, deprecation. Those being in the CTV, gaming, and commerce media ecosystem. How would you assess your capability to compete in those areas, given your inherent assets and your massive pool of first-party data?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just said it. I mean, that is the you know, we're getting a lot of traction with our identity, you know, our ID solution, and you know, again, I think it's because we have access to an immense amount. And you think about, to your last question, smaller than the other guys, right, but huge compared to everybody else. That's right. A very substantive, you know, I call it walled garden, but you know, we own that audience, and it's a huge amount of first-party data. So that definitely makes us dangerous and effective in that space for sure. And
you have the consented permissions to utilize that first-party data in a privacy
Connect ID on our side.
Yep.
We do.
And that's got to be a huge competitive advantage.
It is, and that's certainly growing hugely as well. And by the way, including the areas that you're talking about, all the new spaces, you know, we grew triple digits in CTV last year, and that's our fastest growing piece this year. And right. I think some people have talked today about the Marriott deal that was just announced today. So we have, you know, we are in you know, retail media networks, but that's, I think, the first one to be done in travel. Right. Which is really interesting.
I think that is. We didn't even have it on our category because they just announced it. Yeah. But yeah, that's fascinating that the travel companies are getting into it.
That's right. So yeah, so it's all interesting, and I think it's good to be back in the game, you know.
So a month ago, or a couple months ago, there was some rumors floated around your discussions with potential sports betting companies, presumably your Yahoo Fantasy Sports and that whole opportunity, just the brand association with that. I mean, it's one of the hyper growth sectors, is an opportunity. You probably don't want to comment on specific conversations, but that's got to be a green shoot area to focus on.
Yeah, and I'd say if you think about the obvious next places to go, but I look at every one of these categories as a funnel. Like, that's the product management way to think about what Yahoo does in each one of these from our side and pulling the levers of these businesses. So for sports, the top of the funnel is the first place you have to focus and get really healthy there and do the basics really well, and that's going to be news and scores. We're one of the top 2 fantasy platforms, so if you do those, you've earned the right to do fantasy and then daily fantasy, and certainly betting is the next thing, and right now we have a partnership with BetMGM that's gone back a few years, and so we're throwing people over the wall to BetMGM at that point. And I think some of the way to think about the business going forward, and I think, again, this is what's changed about Yahoo becoming a standalone private company again. And if you think about the years as a public company, kind of stretching to make quarters, both Yahoo and AOL kind of to do that. Some of the same thing inside of Verizon, helping the mothership. I've been part of that at other companies. Being able to be private and standalone, we can do things for our own equity value now at this point, right? Things that will be for the medium and long term and not just short term quarterly numbers. So that's how I think about it. I think everybody tries to come at us with business development deals and sending them traffic and sending them our users. I think the way to think about betting, but it could be a lot of other categories across finance and others, is we're going to do things growing the true equity value of Yahoo.
What was your biggest surprise? The assumption you made on the way in, and then when you discovered the reality once you got there. What was your biggest upside, downside? Your biggest surprise?
Honestly, I may have said this before, but it's been how many people have been rooting for Yahoo. I don't know if that's some backlash to some of the perceptions with other companies, or whether there's something inherent and latent in the Yahoo brand. I've been part of brands that were just never going to come back.
Right.
And the thing about Yahoo is it has an incredible. People have a huge affection for it, in this kind of modern, vintage way.
Yeah.
And I think we have to reward that on the product side by innovating, doing things right. Getting back on that side of things. But yeah, across the board from minute one, I wasn't exactly sure the perception of coming in. People were effusive and super positive and wanting us to kind of get back at it and be able to have an impact again.
Well, the theme music we started this event was "Welcome Back, Kotter" theme music, so it's kind of got that nostalgia feel to it. Yeah. Let's talk about the future. Shiny new things like metaverse, Web3. Any considerations around that stuff, or do you take a more, we sort of described that, these could be big potential, but let's be realistic about near-term possibilities. What assets do you have, and what big of an opportunity do you think you have to play in that whole world?
Yeah, let's work backwards. To me, I guess you guys are going to talk about this in a minute, but the metaverse side of things is, again, I've been looking at VR and AR for years, and looking at the clock, waiting for that moment to come. It still feels very early to me.
Yep.
And I think I caught up in stonks and things happening earlier this year with NFTs and other things. I think we're very, very much on the early side. Right. And then going past that, once it really does hit, and I think you are talking years down the road. I think it's benefited some people to be able to talk about it now, but that really hitting in the way that you're going to be wearing goggles and all that. Because in other ways, we're already living in the metaverse. With your phone, you're already, there's a lot of ways you already are.
Yep.
It does feel quite a bit down the road. And when you get there, there are going to be so many problems. You talk about content management and things just within like Twitter or other places. Just wait for the metaverse and getting kicked off an island by a troll in a mask. Which are real things on Second Life. But yeah, so I think that's really, Web3 I think is incredibly real. And we're gonna have fits and starts, and obviously we're in a bit of a trough right here, right now. But and I look at this both through the lens of like Yahoo Finance, where when we're handing people off at that moment of trading, and that's across both crypto and stocks, just on that side of things. But then tokenization, and if you go back to identity, and this cookieless world, there certainly is something to the notion of users owning their own data, being able to be rewarded for it, and incentivized with it, and being able to kind of choose their own adventure with how that data is used. I think that part of Web3 can actually be incredibly interesting. And again, we're going to have NFTs in sports, and there's all kinds of ways that's going to hit Yahoo. But yeah, it's not a fad. So
let's say DMS 2024, 2 years from now, you're back here on the stage, we're having this conversation. Yeah. What do you hope to be able to sort of tell about what you've accomplished at Yahoo?
Honestly, my job here is growth. So that's going to be the one thing that we're going to be worried about, and that if you look back, I mean, I think we will have launched great products. We're going to have got the operations of the company straight with great people and the right structure. You're definitely going to see us be aggressive. I don't think, I think you will see us in market doing some very interesting things, buying and selling. And at the end of the day, though, I think it's going to come down to growth for each one of these businesses. Yep. And that's how I'm going to be measured, and that's what's going to create value for investors. So if we haven't done that if we don't see that starting by 2024 in the right direction, there's a problem. Okay.
I got to ask this final question. You're a product guy, and you're a grizzled media veteran. You
yes,
know
Netflix
the landscape.
Have ads. Yes.
You and me both. Right now, there's a product guy going after Twitter. Do you think Elon Musk ends up with Twitter, or is he playing some kind of a mind
He
game?
has Twitter. There'd have to be a lawsuit to back out of that at this point, right?
Well,
unless there was détente
or a
in some
tweet
way.
with an emoji, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm still trying to get over that.
But are you betting that he ends up with the company, or no? What would you prognosticate? Just out of pure speculation.
How could you even at this point know?
Oh, yeah.
Again, I do tend to think that there was not a real cohesive plan coming into this.
That's for certain.
And while I do look, I think
of the day.
any internet product person like me has looked at Twitter for years and think there's a lot you could do with it. You got to match that up against the value of where it's being purchased and what you can really do to drive it. So I've thought a lot about that. But whether he gets it or not, I mean, it's a soap opera right now.
Well, Jim, I think this room would agree with the general internet sentiment that people are very hopeful about Yahoo, so I think everyone's rooting for you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, sir.